I'm Gun, and this is a introduction and gameplay video of the Cold Caster Shadow. A Cold Caster is a character who uses cold spells, obviously. There are two main spells, but one is Freezing Pulse, which is their AoE, kills a lot of monsters at once, and the other one is Ice Spear, which is a long-range, single-target attack. They complement each other really, really well. You can actually use Ice Spear as an AoE if you put greater multiple projectiles on it, but I think Freezing Pulse is a much better AoE than Ice Spear. This is a map run for a 67 map. It's got pretty easy mods, just more rare monsters and 2 bosses. So nothing really challenging here. This is just kind of an example of how the character plays. So for multiple monsters, you're going to be trying to get in close with Freezing Pulse, blow them all up. Freezing Pulse is a spell that actually has damage fall off, meaning that it does less damage at long range and more damage at close range. So you want to figure out how you can get close to the monsters without actually dying. So there are monsters that are very dangerous, like those spitters, that shoot a lot of projectiles at you that you don't want to get. Sometimes you don't want to get right up in their face because you might die, so you can use Ice Spear to shoot them from far away and kind of snipe them like that. Though nothing in this map is going to be too threatening to me. If you have, worse gear in a high level map with worse mods, there are a lot of situations where you don't want to just go in guns blazing with Freezing Pulse, and you do want to kind of sit back and use Ice Spear and also your totem. There are a lot of options for what you can put in your totem. Right now I've got Ice Spears with greater multiple projectiles, burns like a fire. 5 Ice Spears, they freezes enemies a lot, does pretty decent DPS. So it's a good combination of both offense and defense. There are other options like Summon Skeletons, which is a purely defensive option, or Spark Totem, where you put Spark and Fork on it. This is a reflex, so watch out for these guys. Spark Totem stacks shock on things, which makes you do like 100% more damage when you stack shocks, but there's no defensive freezing benefits like with the Ice Spear totem. I actually have Life Leech linked to my Ice Spear right now to deal with Reflect. It's a pretty good option. Otherwise, you kind of have to put your totem to kill Reflect mobs. You'll pretty much kill yourself unless you have pretty low DPS. Speaking of DPS, this one thing this build is really good at is putting out a very high amount of DPS, while also not sacrificing your survival too much because you're freezing things a lot. So right now, with fairly good gear, I have 7,574 DPS on my Freezing Pulse. This is my tooltip DPS, and since Freezing Pulse is linked to lesser multiple projectiles, it's firing 3 projectiles doing 7,500 DPS. So if something is right next to me and is getting hit with all 3 projectiles, they're taking in excess of 22,000 DPS, which is a lot. Ice Spear does considerably less, has Life Leech on it, so right now it's only 5,000 DPS, but that's without the long range crit bonus in. So if you have Ice Spear and you're hitting something at long range, it's going to crit about 42% more than if you're just hitting something at close range. It's going to almost double actually DPS with how much crit multiplier I have on it. So Ice Spear is doing nearly 10,000 single target DPS at long range. And also will have once you get the build finished, you get decent crit here. Ice Spear is going to have nearly 100% crit at long range. This allows you to, I'll show you later in the video, allows you to basically freeze lock a lot of really tough enemies like rare monsters or bosses. You see I've summoned a couple zombies that are running around. For me right now in this map, they're not really important, but with worse gear and when soloing zones are difficult, picking up zombies is really, really helpful. And it's kind of a chore sometimes because they'll die really quickly in many cases, especially lower level zombies. Like these are level 19 zombies, they've got 8,000 health. They're fairly durable, but earlier in the game, there are a lot of situations where they'll just fall over since this is not a minion build, it's just using zombies. It's kind of this meat shield. But it is worth it to keep them up in a lot of situations. If you're doing, say, if you're level 62 and you're doing Linaris level 3 and you go high, you probably want to keep those on. Curse I'm using most of the time is Frostbite. This lowers their cold resistance and makes them easier to freeze. It's going to be your main curse. Another curse I use is Enfeeble. This makes them do less damage and crit less often. It's really useful against enemies who can't freeze or maybe one-hit you, and you want to avoid that. So maybe a pack of elite Roas, or a boss, like a story boss, like Burbale, for example, or Piety is really, really hard to freeze. So you might want to put an Enfeeble on her, just to make sure she doesn't two-shot you or something. These snakes, really fast-moving snakes, ordinarily actually pretty dangerous because they get right up on you, but when they get right in your face, it actually makes it easier to freeze them with Freezing Pulse, so it's usually okay. There aren't really any very dangerous enemies in this map, except for the Tentacle Spitter guys. Those are kind of the worst. If I find another one, I'll point it out. These leeches actually do. Wow, he just got one shot. That should be a problem if they let more than one of them with you at the same time. For defenses, this build, I think it's basically enough plus life nodes not to get two-shot by physical damage. And then you have a big enough buffer of life and energy shields so you don't blow up. It's got pretty decent defenses against elemental resist because you should be gearing to kind of cap out your elemental resist as much as possible. Here's Wharf. I'll show you an Ice Spear. You can basically just stand back and freeze him until he dies. Now I'm going to frostbite on him right now. And this, yeah, 2 unique mods is good. Just talk about maps. This character is actually a very good endgame character, both for soloing and for groups. People will really like it if you freeze bosses like that. That's not a very dangerous boss, but for example, like in Overgrown Ruins, like the Loathe boss with the lightning strike, or the flickering large spider boss, if you freeze those and stop them from killing people, people will be very happy with you. In general, freezing anything, of course, people are going to like that. Except for summoners who won't be able to summon anything. And you can do almost any map mod, really. The only things you can't do are Elemental Reflect and Blood Magic. You can even do Chaos damage, though it's kind of a pain in the ass because you won't have any energy shield. If you lose it, it won't come back. And that's kind of a big part of your defense. But almost anything other than those three is pretty comfortable to do with this build. And that's the end of the map. So maybe I'll do some more in the future, talk more in depth. But thank you for watching. Bye.